Palipo na masharti unipe imani yako Baba. Paliko na giza nionyeshe mwangaza wa. Nishirikishe Yesu ni nuru na mwanga. Na uzima wa milele. Acheni Mungu aitwe Mungu. Maana fadhili zake ni za milele. Maisha ni majaribu. Yesu ndiye funga kazi zote.
So welcome everyone to this gathering with the Unitarian Universalist Church of Bowling Green. We're gathering online this morning. It's a beautiful fall day. So thanks everybody for taking time away from that to join us here online. We are a welcoming congregation. Everyone is welcome to join us, no matter where you come from, what you believe, who you are, or who you love. All are welcome here. We each have different paths we take. And different ideas and different approaches to our religion. But here in this place and at this time, we choose to journey together and learn from each other. This morning, our service is called Forming a More Perfect Union. The artwork there is got the United States motto, E pluribus unum, out of many one, which of course is a challenge. It's hard to form a union out of two people, let alone millions, but here we are. To emphasize that, we're going to hear from two speakers today, Susan Webb and John Downing. Two of our members will be speaking to their thoughts on citizenship and policies and politics and how that is informed by their religion. We begin our service, as usual, with a chalice lighting. The flaming chalice is a symbol of Unitarian Universalists around the world. It was started in World War II. It has gone through many design changes and many different ways people have of drawing it. And each person kind of makes their own chalice, which works really well for our religion, since each person has their own approach to our religion. Many families have a chalice at home that they light. Here we see one of our youngest members lighting our church chalice, which is, sing along if you'd like to.
Rise, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy. Rise, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy. Rise, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy.
Our opening reading is from Mr. Abraham Lincoln, his first inaugural address in March 1861. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone, all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. Please join in singing the hymn Fire of Commitment, which is number 1028 in Singing the Journey hymnal.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, then our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way. When we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
We'll now have a short time for reflection. We'll be hearing the sound of the singing bowl, after which we'll have some time for silence, meditation, and prayer. And then we'll sing the song Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Our first speaker this morning will be Susan Webb.
So, what a week. What an election. I don't think any of us, whether we're ending up on the winning or the losing side, feel particularly satisfied by how it's all been happening. For me, it's been pretty scary and hyper intense. Like any other election, it will have an impact on how we address issues vital to our nation: energy policy, military action, the environment, civil rights, issues that directly affect our welfare as individuals and as a nation. But that's always been true. What dialed up my fear factor has been how far apart the sides have become and how hostile we are in opposition. A clear takeaway from the results of the vote is the extent to which we are a divided electorate. In a Slate magazine article Wednesday, author Fred Kaplan stated, "The fact is, we are perhaps more than any time since the late 1850s, a divided country, divided not by our ideology and policy preferences. That's normal. It's what elections are supposed to decide. But also by the way we see the world. The two sides seem to occupy different universes. This divide is not new, nor is it limited to our politics. Journalist Bill Bishop, writing in the early 2000s, called it the big sort. We've had a decades-long process of clustering by geography, income, and culture. We've sorted ourselves into homogeneous enclaves with self-reinforcing and mutually opposing worldviews. Sounds to me like what we often refer to as bubbles. Even with Kentucky roots and 40-some years of residency in this state, I find that most of my community consists of people from somewhere else who share my worldview, or at least one similar to it. I'm in my own little bubble. Millions of us are in bubbles, and the polarization resulting from them has become a way of campaigning and governing. Party affiliation has become synonymous with our culture, religion, and attitudes towards race and place. Within our nation's discourse and decision-making, there seems to be no search for win-win outcomes. Instead, our rival struggles are a source of vindication for us and cause a magnifying of our loyalty to our side. If a result offers our side a relative advantage, we seem willing to accept that it might be harmful to some or all. This is not just scary and dysfunctional. It's destructive of our national community. In a New York Times opinion piece entitled, "Either Trump or Biden will win, but our deepest problems will remain," Yuval Levine suggests, more often our deepest problems aren't really amenable to resolution by a president. These problems have been adding up to something of a social crisis, evident not only in the breakdown of our political culture, but also in the isolation and despair that have driven up suicide and opioid abuse rates, and in a sense of alienation that leaves whole communities feeling excluded from the American story and turn angrily rejecting it. He goes on to note, we tend to look at forms of breakdown in our society in terms of what they produce: anger, cynicism, a rejection of tradition. But we should be wise to also consider what they implicitly demand and yearn for: responsibility, integrity, and above all, solidarity. Reading that opinion piece, I recalled hearing an interview with an individual who self-described as apolitical. She talked about when she had ventured into a Trump rally. She said it felt so welcome and accepting, and everyone was so kind. We yearn for a sense of community. We want to belong, so much so that we may not notice or even care if a community doesn't welcome everyone. In fact, the sense of belonging is stronger then a community is, if a community is simultaneously inclusive and exclusive. We have we're in and they're out. Standing in line to vote, I felt proud of myself for being there and hopeful that I was doing something that would contribute to making things better. I figured everyone else was there for that as well, and that they shared my sense of urgency about the outcome. I knew each of us probably had very different ideas about what better meant and what the greatest threats to our well-being are, and would vote differently. I wondered how much our urgency and fear were based in the distortion and misunderstandings of each other's intentions and goals. I wondered how much was the result of our concerns being manipulated to push power into the hands of people more concerned with holding on to or having power than anything else. I wasn't mad at anyone for being there. We were all carefully keeping our distance as our eyes met over the masks we were wearing for our mutual protection. We were together exercising our right to vote as citizens of a democracy, calmly and confidently. And in the current political climate, that felt surprising. It's frustrating to hear opinions stated as truths when the opinions lack grounding in widely acknowledged facts. It's scary to realize those facts aren't even widely acknowledged anymore. It's shocking and disconcerting to hear a group you identify with being characterized by others as having beliefs and intentions you have never held. Much of what is happening needs to be challenged and changed so that we can build a more just and equitable world. But we can't do it waging war against each other and our neighbors. Reacting from a place of anger and outrage will not serve us, will not serve our country in making a lasting and meaningful change. Maybe before putting our all into the next election, we could take a pause. We could grieve our losses and celebrate our gains, then reconnect with a vision of wholeness and cooperation. We could prepare to step outside our bubbles by doing the hard work of dealing with our own reactivity when things don't go our way. We could stop our search for someone to blame. We could curb our impulse to ridicule people and attack defensively. We could commit to forego using the most destructive tactics of our opponents. It's hard to reach out to people we regard as our opposition or even enemies if we aren't in a calm and centered place ourselves. To start working towards a different way of being, we can search out and practice techniques that calm our nervous systems and scale back our hypervigilance. We can get empathy for what it's been like to have so many needs unmet by what has been happening. We can find our capacity to put aside our judgments, to deny the impulse to inform others of the gaps in their understanding, and we can start listening. We can start taking life-affirming steps rather than feeding off the energy of shared outrage and falling into endless loops of grievance and demonizing. We can begin to listen to our fellow citizens again to find common ground. All of our Unitarian Universalist principles support taking citizenship beyond political partisanship. We are called to contribute and participate together in providing for the common welfare of our communities, even if sometimes that's at the cost of our individual interests. We are called to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, not to just believe or acknowledge it, but to promote it. So maybe we refrain from demonizing and degrading others. maybe not mock their appearance or call them unsavory names or post disrespectful memes about them. Even when they really deserve it and it's not too hard. And it's hard not to. Even if, maybe even especially if we disagree with their ideas and oppose their policies as we work against injustice and inequality. Our principles call us to engage in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We should take responsibility for our actions and our inactions in seeking and sharing truth. Haven't we experienced enough damage caused by spreading rumors and sharing online posts without checking out their veracity? Truth matters. We need to protect it. We are called to promote the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in our society at large. This requires gaining understanding that leads to power with, rather than power over or power against. We are called to work toward our goals of peace, liberty, and justice for all, not just for us in our little bubbles. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Heard that before? We are called to respect the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. It is within that web of shared commitment that we can fulfill our role within the wider community and thus express our fullest selves. Bridging the divide will not be easy. There will be missteps and disappointments. But my real world experience has shown me that it's the relationships of mutual respect and shared commitment to the common good that are the ones where my best self shows up. They are the relationships I want to have and need to have to build a world worth living in. I don't want to be in a society where we just go back and forth between one side winning and the other side winning, losing and the other side losing. Let's have a society where we are all committed to contributing to being sure everybody's needs are heard and addressed, where we gain from each other's strengths and we offer support for our weaknesses, where finding the solutions that work for all is value. Let's step out of our bubbles and begin building the bridges we need to reach our fellow citizens. Please join me in this. I'd love to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Our next speaker is going to be
Oh.
John Downing. John prepared his ahead of time, and so we'll be listening to him on the screen.
Good morning. I was asked to talk about the idea of forming a more perfect union. And unfortunately, our union at the moment is far from perfect. We're having a lot of upset over the election this week that shouldn't be happening. So I'll talk a little bit about what my political philosophy is. Yours may be very different, it may be similar. You may not like anything I say. I am fiscally conservative. I think that the government only needs to spend what it collects in taxes. I think the government is best that is closest to us, local and state. And if the feds want to spend more money, they should let us have the privilege of spending more in taxes or get voted out. I'm for a smaller federal government. It tries to do far too much, and some of it well, some of it not well. The Department of Education spends like $100 billion a year and has made no discernible difference in education in this country. I like government that's limited in scope, government that protects us personally and personal property, a government that punishes fraud or theft, a government that protects us from violence locally or internationally, and a government that enforces contracts. I like the Constitution and Bill of Rights as written. I'm dismayed by how often it's ignored, period. It can be changed if people want to, if enough do. Otherwise, I think we should be following it. Socially, I'm liberal to radical. I think private transactions between consenting adults is not any of the government's business to regulate. Our bodies are our own property and we're responsible for them. I want personal liberty as much as possible, as long as it doesn't harm others. And I like Thomas Jefferson's idea that what doesn't pick my pocket or break my leg is none of my business. I think everyone else has the same right. I believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, our first principle. I believe that everyone deserves to be treated equally. I know that is not currently being done. If we have lighter skin, we do have a lot of things that are taken for granted, which are lumped under the heading of white privilege. I don't particularly want to be any less privileged, but I want everybody else, regardless of skin color, ethnic background, or anything else, to have exactly the same privileges. I don't like personal labels. When we see someone or meet someone, our mind subconsciously, immediately, rapidly evaluates them and tells us stories about what they're like. And this usually is entirely subconscious, happens within a second or less. We need to think about that initial thought. Often it's right, often it's badly wrong. If we label someone, and our minds do this constantly, we know a little about them, but we don't know a lot. We all have unique beliefs and opinions. They're not necessarily consistent, and we should look at them once in a while, but no two people feel exactly the same thing about everything, and we need to at least be willing to listen to other people's point of view. Libertarians. Libertarians have very wide beliefs. There's not just one group of libertarians. There's some on the left who don't believe in property rights, some who are anarchists or Marxists. There are those on the center or right who believe in property rights, capitalism, and limited government. All capitalism is free exchange of goods or services between consenting people. All libertarians seem to have a common belief in personal liberty. So my ideas generally are about the same as close to center or center-right libertarians. I like the writings of Hayek, von Mises, and Locke particularly. Politics. Both major parties left me long ago. Democrats, I generally agree with social ideas, but frequently not with the programs they instill to try to help people. Often help hurts more than it helps, and we need to have better follow-up. I think frequently they're very poor on economics. They spend money with good intentions, but often bad results that are often not corrected. And they don't seem to know the word deficit. Republicans. Republicans talk about fiscal responsibility a lot, except when they could do something about it, when they're in power. And for the last decade or more, there's the litmus test among Republicans about being anti-abortion. Senator Rand Paul, when he was running for office, really tried to avoid saying anything about it and was pretty neutral. When he got elected, and in the Senate, he was told that if he didn't come out as being against abortion, that he would not get much in the way of appointments to committees or much power. So unfortunately, he took that advice and has become very anti-abortion. Now, I practiced medicine before and after Roe v. Wade, so I have different perspectives from different times. I know abortions didn't start before Roe. They've been done for thousands of years. They're legal in some places, in some countries. They were illegal in a few U.S. states before Roe, but only 3 or 4, I think. But there were back alley abortions done by people who had no medical qualifications. Some abortionists required a woman to have sex with them before they would do the abortion. And in the U.S., with Roe v. Wade, they became legal, safer, and much more available afterward. And sometime I will be happy to talk with you about some of the things that have happened over the years that has led me to think what to do. I have a lot of concerns about our republic. Our political polarization is horribly toxic. It's widespread. Many partisans don't respect members of the other party or treat them as human. And working together in the Congress on major issues is rare. So you end up with something being passed straight party lines in one administration, and then when the power changes, a lot of it's undone or changed. We need to set up things so that people can talk across the aisle. The leaders of the House and Senate have huge power now. I don't think they used to have 20 or 30 years ago as much. They demand loyalty and votes, and anyone who deviates from that is shunned and punished. Look at Senator Romney and Senator McCain. What might help? I think term limits for all politicians would be a really good idea and a great start. I think a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution where they have to stay within what they collect would be good. And I would like to see federal powers limited. The 10th Amendment in the Bill of Rights was intended to keep the government small. It says that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited to it by the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. And this was largely followed until the 1930s when the Supreme Court gutted the 10th Amendment. The feds before that had very limited power to pass out goodies and money. Now they do anything they can think of and get lots and lots of money donated supposedly for their races, and they pay attention to that. Every senator and representative, I think, has at least 4 lobbyists for different issues. I would like to see more power taken back by the Congress and less for the executives. Now, often the Congress has let the executive, the president, go ahead and do pretty much what they want to, so they don't have any responsibility in what's done, and they can deny it if it turns out to not be popular. My biggest concern: federal fiscal irresponsibility and deficit spending. Spending more than is collected and borrowing the difference is spending money, borrowed money, on ourselves and leaving payback to our children and to their children. At some point, if we don't correct it, we're going to face a fiscal collapse where lenders will ask for higher interest rates, which will increase the cost of debt, cause high inflation, and previously dominant countries have usually eventually failed when they overspent and chronically debased their currency. Argentina is a good example of this. 100 years ago, they had about the same size economy as we do. Now it's a basket case and has episodic hyperinflation. Our federal deficit by year is a percent of the budget. Is up and down. It was up and down during and after the Second World War, but then in the 1990s, it got quite high again, and the amount greatly increased. It dropped between 2016, 2010, and 2015, but it's back up now. The government borrows almost 9% of every dollar that is spent. We can barely cover the interest now. And if interest rates go up, the government's not going to be able to cover the debt payments to the government and the people who own them. So taxes on everybody has to go up. Our money will be worth less, probably a lot less. We will have more inflation, and inflation is a hidden tax on all of us, except the government. The government gets to pay back their debts with lower cost money. We end up getting less for every dollar we spend. So our children are being taxed without representation to cover spending above revenue. We are stealing from them and their future, and we need to stop it. So what can we do? Well, politicians are never going to vote for term limits. Now, how might term limits help? In their last term, they might pay more attention to the country and not to what they can do to get elected the next time. We might get some fresh people and ideas into the Congress. And 82% of Americans support term limits. A balanced budget amendment, again, the Congress is never going to limit their own spending. The only way they will stop borrowing and spending more is if we can get a balanced budget amendment into the Constitution. 74% of Americans support it, but I don't think there are two people in Congress who do. There is a way to change the Constitution, but it's a constitutional convention where 2/3 of state legislatures ask for a constitutional convention, and legislation to call for one has passed in 17 states. There are different ones, though, and the group Term Limits, U.S. Term Limits, is trying to get a constitutional convention set up just for limiting terms and restricting anything else, because people who criticize the Constitutional Convention say it could take up anything in the Constitution, which is apparently true. So we need to pay attention to our kids. Maybe we need to give them a little bit bigger allowances. And we need to be aware that at the moment, this is what's heading toward our children. It's going to severely limit their lives.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you, Susan, for both sharing your thoughts with us today. We'll have time to discuss that after this service in our Zoom chat rooms. It's now time for the offertory. This congregation is supported by the offerings of its members and friends. We encourage you to give generously as you can. There'll be an address on the screen, a website address you can go to, and also a mailing address if you'd like to prepare a check and prepare that for mailing. thank you for your gifts. We will use them wisely in the service of this congregation and our community. We're ready to come to the ending of our time together today. Our final reading is again from Mr. Lincoln, and this is from 1865, as the war was coming to a close. Both sides read the same Bible and pray to the same God, and each invokes his aid against the other. Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray, that this mighty scourge of war may speedily pass away. Yet, if God wills that it continue until all the wealth piled by the bondman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, until every drop of blood drawn with the lash shall be paid by another drawn with the sword. As was said 3,000 years ago, so still it must be said. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. We'll be now extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. So we bid you go in peace, go in friendship, and go reach outside your bubble and talk to people you may not think you have much in common with. Our postlude today is This Land Is Your Land, written by Woody Guthrie in 1940.
We'd like you to join us in perhaps with the greatest song ever written about our home. The father of American folk music, Pete Seeger, his grandson, Tyler. Lead us, Pete.
You sing it with us. We'll give you the words. When I was walking that ribbon of highway,
as I went walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me and in the skyway, I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me.
Everybody sing it.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and I rambled and I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts, and all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me.
Everybody.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me.
In the squares of the city,
Squares of the city,
by the shadow of the steeple,
shadow of the steeple,
by the relief office, I saw my people
saw my people
as they stood there hungry.
They stood hungry.
I stood there whistling.
I stood there whistling. This land was made for you and me.
A great high wall tried to stop me.
Tried to stop me.
Great big sign there.
Great big sign there.
Private property. On the other side, it didn't say nothing. That sign was made for you and me.
That sign was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. Yeah, this land was made for you and me.
Nobody living
Nobody living
can ever stop me.
never stop me.
I go walking
As I go walking
Freedom Highway.
Freedom Highway.
Nobody living
Nobody living
can make me turn back.
make me turn.
Hey, this land